My name is Marsha P. Johnson, and it's just come to my attention that I've been incarnated into a white little boy body, so if you don't mind, I would love to get a little gussied up. Is that alright with y'all? Thank you so much. Thank you for understanding. The P in Marsha P. Johnson stands for pay no mind. I walk down the street in New York City, someone looks at me and they say, "What is that?" And I say, "Pay no mind, darling." Now, I've been reincarnated into this form, as cute as it may be. I'm not familiar with it, but I've been reincarnated into this form because I can tell that there are a couple things going on these days in this world right now. Firstly, June 28th, 2019 marks the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall riots. Does anybody know what that is? I see a lot of people that do and some people that don't. Well, that's wonderful. Let me break it down for you. Let me take a seat. Well, you know, let me, I love to talk and I got a little bit of time, so let me just think about where I want to go. But, let's start in the beginning. So my birth name was Malcolm. And I was born in New Jersey. And I love New York City. I partied in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s. We had a grand old time. And I would take the train from Jersey. And while I was on the train, I would change into Marsha. And when I was Marsha, I could be free and I could do whatever the well I damn please. Thank you very much. And I spent a lot of time in Greenwich Village on the Lower East Side. And it was a beautiful time, and it was an interesting time, especially in the late 60s. Civil rights, women's rights, the war, there was a lot going on. So it was an interesting time to be in New York City. And it was also an interesting time to be a gay person, to be a queer person. Back in the day, I identified as a transvestite because there wasn't language to talk about different experiences of identity. Today, y'all have queer, transgender, non-binary. We didn't have that back then. We also didn't have safe spaces for gay people to be in. The bars there were no gay flags. You had to hide in secrecy. And one of the bars that I would frequent to quite often with my girlfriend Sylvia Rivera, another fabulous trans woman, was the Stonewall. And the Stonewall was a bar that was for a lot of effeminate men, queer people of color, dykes. So the people that weren't thought of high class in the gay community. And the police would come and they would raid Stonewall every once in a while, pretty frequently, because it was illegal. So in the bar, you would walk in and there'd be mirrors all over the place, and you would belly up to the bar, and you would find a cute, handsome man to talk to, and he would be looking in the mirror as well. Because you couldn't look face to face and have a conversation. Because the cops, they would come in secrecy, and if they found you flirting or cuddling up next to somebody, they would arrest you. It was difficult times. And it was also difficult times being a trans woman of color. It was hard for me to find a job. I was homeless. My friends let me crash on their couches, on the floor, wherever I could be. I had to resort to sex work because I couldn't get any jobs just by existing. I had been raped, I had been murdered. Excuse me, not murdered, I had been shot. But back to Stonewall. So June 28th, 1969, it was a hot evening, a quiet evening in New York. And around 2 a.m., the bar was raided by 4 cops, 2 men, 2 women. And normally when this happens, they would try to careen people and get them in line and get their identification. If they thought you were suspicious of gay activity, then they would take you down to jail. And the people that were dressed up as women, the women cops would take them to the bathrooms and have them show their body parts to identify what kind of gender they were. This is in 1969, this was not a long time ago. But things were a little different this evening because it was a hot evening, everybody was a little bit irritable, and things were kind of disorganized and people were starting to resist. And we decided that we had enough of this. Enough was enough. And we looked at all these other movements that were happening at the time, and we were thinking, where's our community? Why have we not stood up and done something for ourselves? So people started fighting. People started resisting with the police. More police were called in. And I decided that I had enough. So what did I do? I took a shot glass and I threw it at a mirror. It smashed. And I said, I have my civil rights. And according to history, that was the shot glass that was heard all over the world. So when we were being lined up outside, it was very disorganized. The police didn't really know what to do because there was so much resistance. We didn't believe that we could fight back as feminine people. We didn't think that we had the ability to push up against. But there was a big commotion starting to happen outside. More people started to come, and then we realized that we do have a community. And there are enough people in this city who care to do something about it. Long story short, because, and you know, the bar wasn't even owned by gay people. The bar was owned by the mob. Because gay people couldn't, that's what happens when there are inaccessible spaces. That's where corruption comes in. And so some people started destroying the bar. Some lit a trash can on fire and threw it through the window. The cops had to hide inside the bar because they were afraid because we were finally fighting back. So the bar eventually got destroyed, but it didn't really matter because it wasn't our bar to begin with. The next night there were even more riots. There were about 1,000 people outside. Went from about 200, 300 to 1,000 the next night. And on June 28, 1970, 1 year later, the first gay rights parade happened in Chicago, New York, San Francisco, LA, to commemorate what had happened. So it was a very proud moment. Now I'm also here today not only to recite the history of what happened, because it's the 50th anniversary, but because I know there is a lot of political turmoil going on right now. I know we have someone who is the president who is very divided, divides the country. And I know that women's rights are under scrutiny right now with their ability to take care of their own bodies, transgender rights. serving in the military, healthcare for women and trans people. And even more so, what's going on right now, which was still going on back then, with very little improvement, is the disproportionate amount of people of color within those marginalized groups who are left defenseless. Because a lot of white people in these groups, in these marginalized groups, they can get on by, they have their accessibilities. It's still not easy for them. But people of color, women of color and trans women of color, have to go through a lot more. In New York City, trans women of color are murdered pretty often, over a dozen times a year, without justice. In 1992, my body was found in the Hudson River. There's a big gash on the back of my head. Because I was a black woman who was too fabulous for this world, they decided that it was a suicide. Now, I've had my struggle with mental health issues, haven't we all? But it was not a suicide. And the way that the police wrote it off as nothing to look into because my life didn't matter is a common occurrence to this day. So I just want you all to think about that. What can we do to extend the hand within our own groups to people who have less of a voice? And lastly, the reason why I've been brought back here, and I think into this body, is because I can feel that this boy in this body has not allowed himself to express himself fully. I get images of shame from painting nails and dancing to Britney Spears. Whoever that is, I'm not quite sure. I died before she came out, but I can feel the shame in this boy's heart and the struggle to open that cage up again. And so publicly, I want to tell this boy that expression goes beyond the boxes that our society has put people in. Race, gender, nationality. We love to put people in boxes. And I want this boy to know that his heart and his soul does not belong in a box. And the way that he chooses to express himself shouldn't have any brackets or boundaries. Before I end, I just want to say a quick little bit more about what I've done in New York. Me and my best friend Sylvia Rivera, we opened something called STAR. This is what I want my legacy to really be remembered for. It's the street transvestite action resistance, where we homed and housed tons of little boys and girls who didn't belong to the gender that they belonged to in a safe space in New York. And me and Sylvia had to resort to sex work in order to keep it up. It was dismantled in the 1970s, but was recently brought back. I just want to gas myself up a little bit about what I did. But anyways, thank you so much for spending this time with me. I wish I could talk more. And I have a disco to get up to in the astral plane, so I'll see y'all later.